Alright, boys and girls, this is video number 14, or our last short story summary chart. I do apologize, I didn't see that I didn't do the short story summary for the Cask of Amontillado, so here it is. If you don't have a short story summary chart, a blank one with you, go to my website and go to resources and print one off. Or you can just take a blank sheet of paper and write short story summary chart number 4. Title is Cask of Amontillado. Edgar Allan Poe is your author. It is important to know him as an author. Setting is in Italy during the carnival season. And carnival, you know, is the a term from Mardi Gras, which is Fat Tuesday. So a lot of celebrating going on because the people will be giving up things for Lent. Okay. Also, specifically in the catacombs, which are in the basement of Montresor, which is also his wine cellar. Characters are Fortunato, Montresor, and Lucchese. He mentions Lucchese a couple times. We don't see him in the story, though. Montresor is our narrator, and it's important. I have spoken about this before, but as far as the narration of the story is concerned, it is first-person narration, and is strictly through a limited view of Montresor. On our final test for the short stories unit, one of the things I wanted to focus on during this unit is the point of view of the narrator. And we talked about first person and third person, and then we talked about limited versus omniscient points of view. Our 15th video, our final video that you'll get tomorrow, will be a lot of notes on literary terms that we've already discussed in class, but just making sure you have those notes, as primarily our final exam will be on, instead of just questions of plot, what happens next, what did this character do. That's not what I care about so much with short stories. I care more about you understanding the author's purpose, why they do things the way they do, and what makes them great writers and what makes their stories powerful. It is seen through Montresor's limited point of view here that obviously he is trying to kill this guy because he's been insulted, or whatever his little lies he makes up are, and it's because he's a limited first person point of view. We only see this through Montresor's view, and he's an unreliable narrator. We don't know if he really ever insulted Fortunato anyway. So anyway, that will be part of notes for tomorrow, but it's just important to know that Montresor is the narrator. It is first person and very limited in his mind. Next up, I've got conflicts are man versus man, obviously Fortunato versus Montresor, man versus environment, and Fortunato in his predicament in the environment being in this guy's basement, right? And I think the influence of alcohol is indeed an environmental conflict, right? There are surroundings, there are situations, and everything is thrown off for Fortunato. And definitely in relation to the unit test, I'm going to give you a little hint here. Alcohol is definitely one of the themes. Be careful with alcohol. But more importantly, for our character, Fortunato, it's his own character flaw that leads to his death. His own character flaw in that he's entirely way too intoxicated, thinks he's really smart, knowing great wines, and he foolishly goes into a house with a guy he can't trust. So it's his own character flaw. That's a character flaw internally, that he's gotten himself in this situation. His own character flaw has led to his death, his demise. That's something that'll help you out on the final exam, okay, boys and girls? And finally, man versus self. Montresor's feelings of hatred. There's really a conflict here for Montresor. You can kind of tell he's a murderer and he's insane. He's got some internal conflicts, right? We know that both of these are external conflicts. Both of these are external conflicts, where this is an internal conflict here. The plot summary, maybe you're already copying it, but I'll just read it through. And if I read it too fast and you need to pause pause it to get these notes down. It is the story of Montresor, a man determined to get revenge for unknown reasons on his friend Fortunato. He lures Fortunato down into his family's catacombs with the promise of Amontillado, a rare and expensive wine. Already drunk, Fortunato agrees and follows Montresor through his empty house and down into the deepest parts of the tunnels. Montresor proceeds to chain him to the floor and wall him in. No one hears his screams because of the carnival, and Montresor escapes unpunished. The theme of this story, two themes that are very important. Be careful who you can trust. Be careful with strangers. It's another one of those types of stories. And excessive drinking can lead to negative consequences. Be careful when you make decisions like that. Anyway, the literary terms I want you to know for this story are pun, and we discussed the significance and the relevance of the mason. As he reveals a trowel, he says, "I am a mason." They both don't get each other's kind of jokes here, but Edgar Allan Poe definitely throws that in for us as an obvious pun. And we know that Fortunato being a mason, it's a brotherhood. He's a brother in an organization that's generally given to charities. They're usually a bunch of intelligent, good doers, and it's kind of sad that he's that kind of mason, and our Montresor is the bad mason who's going to be. And bricklayer is not usually bad, boys and girls, but this guy is. He's walling up his victim. In the story as well, there's flashback, and this is kind of a relevant one. When you take a look at all of our stories, there's two stories that significantly use flashback. We know the first is the Scarlet Ibis, and they flash back in that story. It's much older. Remember the beginning of that story, the grinding wheel starts to turn, and his mind is thinking back to Doodle, his brother, and the whole story is told in a flashback. And it's not really revealed in the beginning of the story that it's flashback. It's only at the end, and I want to read this to you. Make sure you take these notes. Flashback. Montresor reveals at the end he is retelling the story 50 years after the murder, revealing that he got away with his crime. And it's really significant. It sounds like it's kind of like happening, as he's doing it and the way he did it, and you feel like you're taken along in the story. It's almost a shock and a surprise. For the better part of a century, or half a century, no one has touched his bones. May he rest in peace. And it's almost like, what? He got away with this. It's really, really dramatic and insane there at the end, and that flashback plays a significant role there. The final literary term for the night is irony, and the three types of irony, boys and girls, situational, verbal, and dramatic irony, are all used in this story. They're all used one way or another. In video number 15, the next video, I am going to give you detailed definitions of situational, verbal, and dramatic irony, and I'll relate it to this story because this story does have all three. But really just think about irony being situational. Is the situation you're in ironic? Are you in the opposite situation you'd think you'd be? Verbal irony is something that's spoken. So are we saying something that's the opposite of what we really mean? That's verbal irony. Dramatic irony is the only one that's really difficult to remember because of its definition or because of its title. But dramatic, I think of dramas, and dramas are like plays that an audience will watch. Well, dramatic irony is just when the audience knows something that the characters don't. That's dramatic irony. So, anyway, we have all three of these things in Cask of Amontillado. Those definitions you'll be writing out in notes, as well as some other literary terms in video number 15. But all those literary terms are very significant for your unit test, and you'll need to take those notes and study them and memorize and make sure that you're prepared, because like I said, this short story unit wasn't really a focus on you learning 5 short stories and what the characters are doing and that kind of thing. I want you to learn about the literature, about how and why the author writes the way he does and what makes his work great, so that hopefully you too can write like that one day. Okay, so thank you, boys and girls, for watching another video. If you need to rewind and make sure you have all these notes, that's great. But this is the last of the short story summaries, so you should be in possession of 5 of these sets of notes. These 5 sets of notes are your best resource for studying for the final unit test of this semester too. Okay, thanks boys and girls. Good night.